Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Hani Abdu. I'm the founder and president of Tradogram.com. I'm pleased this morning to introduce Ahmed Gamami as president of Purchasing Advantage. Mr. Gamami has over 18 years experience in procurement. Since 1995, he has provided consulting services in 17 different countries on topics related to the broad spectrum of purchasing and supply chain management. Mr. Gamami is an author of 2 purchasing books, numerous articles in several leading global purchasing journals, and has done multiple television appearances. He's adjunct professor of purchasing for the only purchasing certificate program in the California State Community College. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Gamami.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate the warm welcome and the big crowd that we have here today. I have the best job in the world. I get to interact with people like you. I'm really passionate about our profession, about what we do, and my goal is to take purchasing out of the back office and have us be perceived as a value-added center of profit inside of our organizations. And so, how did this start? Because I landed in purchasing the exact same way all of you did, which is by accident. After 7 years of undergraduate and graduate study in business and having some work experience, then suddenly I got hired to do purchasing, and frankly I was freaking out because I only knew how to spell it and I didn't know anything else. And then I got angry that I could go through that much business education and not hear the word purchasing. And it was from that time on I knew that, you know, maybe this was destiny, that I need to help do my part to try and change this. And so that's what I do. I get to work with organizations like you to try and make a difference and to try and get you excited about your jobs again, because I meet a lot of frustrated purchasing professionals. So if you ever want to find out more about me, you can just go to purchasingadvantage.com. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. We're going to talk about negotiation strategies for TCO today. Now, I'm not going to focus on probably what you think I'm going to focus on. I'm not going to focus on how to do supplier profit compression strategies, and I'll explain that a little bit more. I personally have the conviction that so much of what we're doing in purchasing today is hurting us and not helping us. And I have a lot of data from working with hundreds and hundreds of companies to be able to stand here and say that. So I'm going to be as honest as I can in strategies that I want to try and drive to help you get better results. But the important thing is, everybody in here needs to commit to change. You're going to go back to the office. You know, I've been traveling so much, I don't even know what day of the week it is. I think it's Saturday. And so you're going to go back to the office on Monday, and you'll have this much email to catch up on and everything. And the risk is that you go back into business as usual. And if we do that, then I failed in some way, right? So everybody here needs to focus on what are the things that I can do differently to start generating better results. And so this was presented by and sponsored by Tradogram. So we thank them for allowing this session to happen. So let's talk about the evolution of the purchasing function and how we got here. So in the 1970s and prior, you know, essentially somebody who hadn't even completed high school could do purchasing. They had the necessary skills. It was place this order fast. As long as you could write things correctly and make phone calls without, you know, making mistakes and things like that. And the real value of purchasing was a true back office function. And by the way, if you look into how academia is teaching purchasing, you know, they're still stuck pretty far behind. Academia has not caught up with us. And then pretty soon in the 80s, there was this realization and this cognition that, hey, maybe purchasing can help us save us some money. So not only we want you to place this order fast, but see if you can get something better for us. Try and lower the price for us a little bit. Then in the 90s, we got even smarter. And we said, let's start making best value decisions, right? And you know, in many sectors, especially I see it in the government sector in the United States, I think the Canadian government is a little bit ahead of the United States government because I think you're allowed to make some best value decisions. But it's tough when you're stuck making lowest bid wins decisions, because you're making price-focused decisions, right? And so we've moved to best value. And how do we lower our total cost of ownership? And every single person in this room has been burned by making a low price decision, probably both in your personal life and your business life. So it's happened to all of us. Isn't this true? And so we're trying to make this transition. Now here's the challenge. Remember I said all of you landed in purchasing by accident? How do I know that? Because for 20 years I've been asking tens of thousands of people this question. And do you know how many people said, I planned for a career in purchasing over a 20-year period? That from the beginning, coming out of high school, they knew they were going to study purchasing, to land a purchasing position, and then did it. 4 people have raised their hands in 20 years, okay? So I can say confidently, you landed here by accident. I can also say confidently, you report to people who landed in purchasing by accident. I can also say confidently that eventually you report, your purchasing reports to someone who doesn't understand purchasing. This is what I see, okay? And then at that level, they say, well, if you save me so much money, how come I don't have that much left over in my budget? Right? It's pretty frustrating. And then they start saying, well, I don't understand this indirect cost savings or soft cost savings. I don't understand this cost avoidance concept, so I'm not going to recognize it. All we'll recognize is direct cost savings. So while we're past the 1990s, we're kind of not. We're still struggling with this a little bit because you getting it is not enough. Isn't that true? Your management has to get it and has to support that. Now where we're trying to go to is supply chain agility, flexibility, TCO, and eventually it will be not the battle of purchasing organizations and the battle of companies, but it's going to be the battle of supply chains and who can come out on top. And if you want to see good examples of this, go to the Japanese auto manufacturers and look at how they've done it. They have outstanding supply chains that they've set up. So here's where we are, okay? And you have to assess for yourself where you sit on that. But at a minimum, we want to be able to do the 1990s piece really well because we're still on that trajectory. And so this is the slide where I really am going to challenge you, and I want to spend a little bit of time here, okay? This is the awakening for me from a TCO perspective, and I hope it's the awakening for you. Because what I see is we are getting more and more sophisticated. Now, let me stop for a second. I want to explain this before I finish that sentence. Let's say this is a hypothetical supplier cost breakdown, okay? They give you a price. Let's say the supplier is making about 20% profit. Let's just say, okay? It'll always be a little bit different. So what that means is they've got 80% costs, right? 80% cost, 20% profit. My concern is that I see purchasing organizations focusing almost exclusively on that 20%. And so when you go to a supplier and say, give me a better price, what is it that they hear? What do you think they hear? Okay, I heard a couple hundred people at the same time, but yeah, I think I just heard it now. Did you say it? Yeah, make less profit so I can report more savings. Does anybody here disagree? That's what they hear, right? And you have to know what the other side is hearing. The message here, and I'm putting this in a pie graph so you see it, is that, okay, this is all right. It's okay to pursue profit compression strategies. But when you do that, you're essentially ignoring this huge opportunity that's sitting on the table, right? And that's the supplier cost structure. And so we are, in our profession, will never move away from supplier profit compression. I'm not saying that goes away, but I'm saying it cannot be the only thing in your bag of tricks. You have to be able to look at the complete cost. And so in fact today, what I'm going to spend a lot of time on is how do you move towards assessing and analyzing supplier costs as well? And it's a lot easier than you think, because what I'll say is you don't need to have the answers, okay? It's being able to recognize that there's some real experts with your suppliers, and sometimes we're asking them to do things that just, quite frankly, aren't very smart. And so I'm going to ask you to challenge your end users, and I'm going to ask you to challenge your suppliers to help you get over that hurdle. We'll get into some specific strategies and examples. So if you look at the things we do aggregation of business, we do supply-based reduction, we do supplier negotiations, we do competitive biddings, but all of these presuppose that the cost equation stays untouched, that we're going to see how much we can squeeze that supplier profit in return for more business or in return for something, right? And so, once again, this isn't going away, but I want you to recognize that the biggest opportunity of all is not in supplier negotiations. I'm going to say that one more time. The biggest opportunity of all, let me say it differently, is not limited to supplier negotiations. I think that in fact, I know that you can influence design for TCO before you ever go out to negotiations, and I'll have plenty of examples of that. And so, the question for you is, what happened to negotiating supplier costs? And when you do that, you can drive a true win-win kind of strategy. I'll give you an early example just to warm you up, but I have more coming. I got hired once by a utility company to help them manage their costs. And so I went and got all their costs, put it into a spreadsheet, had to do a lot of cleaning and clustering of data. Then I had them help me take all the uncontrollable costs out. We weren't going to sell plant property equipment. We weren't going to fire people. So we took all the uncontrollable costs out. We were left with controllable costs. Then I did a Pareto analysis, and I sorted it, and I found out one of their biggest costs was PVC pipes. And so then I thought, okay, let's go talk to the PVC pipe supplier. And I went to the PVC pipe supplier, and I said, you have two options. Option A, we're spending a lot of money with you. Option A is we can talk about giving us a lower price by reducing your profit. Option B is we can talk about taking costs, streamlining costs and reducing costs for both parties through that way. Which one do you prefer? And they said, we want to talk about the second one. So that's what I thought. And so I asked them, is there anything we're asking you to do that's not smart, that's adding costs, that just isn't good business, that's creating an artificially inflated price that is getting passed on to us? And I'm sitting there at the table looking at these people, and they're looking at each other, kind of like their body language said, do we tell them or not, right? That's what I saw. Do we tell them or not? So the first thing I want you to know is that you have to make your suppliers comfortable to tell you when you're doing something that's not smart. And I said, you can tell me. We're trying to do this together, right? Tell me what it is. And they said, you are the only customer we have that has a stamp your company name every 18 inches, and then you bury the pipe 3 feet underground. Why are you doing this? It's adding 30% cost to the PVC pipe, and when you sent out the RFP, you told us failure to comply with these specifications will result in bid disqualification. So we were forced to do something that we knew wasn't smart, and if we told you what was the smart thing to do, we'd lose the business. Right? We have to have separate manufacturing lines, separate processes, add all these costs, separate inventory management, and then you're bearing it. It's not even being visible to anybody. You are bearing the product. Why are you doing this? This took about 15 minutes to uncover, okay? So I went back and I talked to the client and I said, do you know it's costing you this much to do this? How important is this to you, right? And they were shocked. They were shocked. Now, the deal is, here's the problem, is that purchasing, you ever picture, you've seen the baton races, right, in the Olympics and things like that. And so purchasing is in this role where they're talking to customers, or the internal customers, the end users, and they're getting ready to get the baton. It's what? The specifications and the scope of work, and they're saying, I got it, now let me run with it. And this is a big problem because you're presupposing that those costs have to be there, right? All of you need to start becoming specification and scope of work analysts to look at, is this designed for TCO? And so the company said, this is a no-brainer. We want to get rid of that 30% cost, and the supplier was delighted to get out of the business of making custom, PVC pipe when they wanted to just do standard really fast. And so that was just one example to kind of get you going. But there's 3 things I'd like you to think about today, and that's where I'm going to spend the rest of this time. The first one is design for TCO, and I just gave you an example. If you think your end users know how to design for TCO, I'm here to tell you they don't. They do not. No matter what their function, it takes somebody with very special training. They know how to design for functionality, for form, for effectiveness, for efficiency, all those things. But there's very, very few people who know how to design for TCO. And if you don't go upstream and drive that model, nobody else will. Nobody will do it. And the world's best negotiator cannot change the fact that a specification or scope of work was not designed for TCO. Do you agree? You're taking something filled with, pardon the expression, but filled with fat, right? And you're trying to get the best deal on fat possible when we don't want it there to begin with. Is everyone with me? We're also going to talk about TCO enabling technology. So I think there's opportunities to use technology to streamline what we do, to have a better audit trail and better tracking, and to deliver lower total cost results, and to ensure competition between suppliers and things like this. And so that's a big deal we'll talk about as well, and I'll segment it into 3 components. Then the third one is supplier innovation. What I want you to know, first of all, I'm going to redefine innovation in this session, because there's words that in the English language that have a positive connotation when they shouldn't, and words that have a negative connotation when they shouldn't. It used to be, for instance, that the word frugal was a very positive thing before my time. But I've read about it, that if somebody was frugal, that was a compliment. They knew how to manage their money. Now, it's, you know, you're a cheapskate if you're frugal, right? And so the perception has totally changed. Well, the word innovation, I think, has gotten, is getting too much positive press, because the problem we have today in purchasing is too much end-user innovation. And I'll talk about that a little bit. And there's the good kind of innovation that solves a problem or captures an opportunity, and then there's the bad kind, which is innovation for the sake of innovation, and that creates all sorts of problems. And I see a lot of smiling faces, so I know it's happening. And if you're not smiling, maybe you're holding it inside, or you don't know it's happening. But we'll get into examples. These 3 things really have little to do with profit compression. It's attacking the big opportunity that I see out there that I don't think purchasing is getting at today. By the way, we'll try to make questions, have time for questions at the end, and we'll have Lynn, who's in here someplace, and she'll be coming around with microphones and things like that.